Good morning, Morai v'Rabotai, Bruchim Habayim. We are continuing on Masechet Succah. We are on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, for Michael Ben Nahid, for the Refuah Shelema V'Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, that they should all have full recovery. Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Today's Amud is also being learned as a Zchut for the Neshama of Rachel Chaya Bat Netanel, should have and Neshama should have an Aliyah Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. This month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Kohen family, by Dayan family, by Shei family. It should be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot. Amen. So we started the next piece of the Mishnah. O shehayu anavav merubim ma'alav. The Mishnah mentioned that one of the psulim of hadas is if you have more berries on the kelach, on the branch, then you have leaves, and that would be pasul. And then we spoke about the fact that you could perhaps snip them, take them off before Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, you cannot do it because of makebe patish or because of metaken mara. That would be perhaps a yisur d'oraita. We spoke about whether or not it stays kasher if you did do the isur of taking the berries off on Yom Tov. Now we're going to go through those methodically and try to figure out exactly the gdarim, the boundaries of each one of these halachot. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said, Davar ze Rabbeinu Agadol Amaro. This was said by Rabbeinu Agadol, our great rabbi. Who is Rabbeinu Agadol of Rav Chisda? Is Rav. Rav was the Rebbe of Rav Chisda. He was known as Rabbeinu Agadol because he was the greatest name of the Amoraic era, to the degree that the Gemara says Rav Tanahu Upalig. Rav is great enough that if we find our backs against the wall, how to explain one of his opinions, because it doesn't seem to match with the Mishnaic, the Tanaic works, we would, push comes to shove, we say, well, you know what? He actually could take on Tana, because he himself could be considered a Tana. That's how big Rav was. That's why, just like Rebbe is called, which means the rabbi, right? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was called Stam Rebbe. Rav is not his name. His name was Abba Arichta, Rabbi Abba. That was his name. Actually, Seder Adorot writes that this is the Rabbi Abba of Zohar HaKadosh, who was the scribe of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who lived a tremendously blessed long life. But nevertheless, his name was Abba, and we call him Rav, the rabbi. The reason that he's not called Rebbe is because obviously the Tanaim, the Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael are called Rebbe, and Chachamim of Bavel are called Rav. That's the distinction that we always have. So just like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was called the rabbi, Rav was also called the rabbi. He was the tremendous luminary of Halakha. So Rabbeinu Agadol of Rav Chisda is Rav. Now we'll realize in just a moment why this is important. And by the way, Rav and Shmuel, even though that Shmuel also was tremendous, Rav and Shmuel, halakha is like Rav. Be'isuri, the only time that halakha is like Shmuel is Bedini, because Shmuel was a seasoned dayan. That's what he did. He was a PhD. He was an expert in Dinei Mamonot. So all of the Dinei Mamonot, if there is a conflict between Rav and Shmuel, we generally speaking follow Shmuel. In everything else, halakha is like Rav, again because of his greatness. Rav Yehuda, who is almost mentioned on every page in Shas, he was a Talmid of Rav first, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, and when Rav passed away, afterwards he went to Shmuel, and obviously Shmuel is the one that called him Shinena, the sharp one. Rav Yehuda was a tremendous Talmid. He was probably the greatest name of the Talmidim of Rav and Shmuel combined. So that's also important to notice that Rav passed away before Rav Yehuda passed away. Rav Yehuda was a Talmid of Rav, and Rav passed away. Then Rav Yehuda went to learn by Shmuel instead of his Rebbe Rav, and hence we have Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, or sometimes we have Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. All of that is important to understand this one line of the Gemara in a chronology of the times of Amoraim, which would actually change a girsa over here in our in our Gemara. It's important to know the timeline and the stories of Amoraim, because sometimes you read the Gemara like this and you say, well, this does not make sense in the timeline of how things happened, because, for instance, over here, says the Gemara, Rav Chisda said in the name of Rabbeinu HaGadol, who is Rav, and he says, Davar ze Rabbeinu HaGadol amaro v'hamakom yeh be'ezro, right? He should be matzliach, he should be gesund, right? Which indicates that Rav still is alive. If he would be, if it would be already after he passed away, it would be very difficult to understand this, because imagine if someone's rabbi has passed away and you say, Hashem should have mercy on his soul, right? That doesn't sound really good. It means that he's not in Gan Eden yet. That would be very disrespectful. So when he says, Davar ze Rabbeinu HaGadol amaro, this was said by our great rabbi, and Hashem should help him, it indicates clearly that Rav is still alive when Rav Chisda is saying this, right? So just get the timeline straight. So you have Rav still alive, and Rav Chisda is codifying what he said to him. And then, what is it that he said? Lo shanu ela b'makom echad, aval b'shnayim o shlosha mekomot kasher. This, that you have these berries grown on top of the branch of hadassim, which is pasul, is only if all these berries are in one clump. They're all in one place, and you see the hadassim, and it looks like interesting. That's when it's pasul. But if they're scattered, there's 3 clumps, 2 clumps, there are 2-3 different places of these berries on the hadassim, there will be kasher. This is what Rav Chisda is saying in the name of Rav, B'chayei chiyuto, when he's still alive. That's what we gathered so far from this one line of the Gemara. Now here's where it becomes interesting. Amar le Rava. Rava said to who? Rav Chisda is mashma, right? Rava says to Rav Chisda, wait a second, you can't say this, because that would be a different psul of menumar. Now, before we even study what he said, that doesn't make any sense, because for those who remember when we learned Kiddushin together in Perek Asara Yuchsin in Daf Ayin Bet, the Gemara there says that when the day that Rav passed away, right, the day that Rav passed away, Rava was born, right? So Rava could not have commented anything about anything that Rav said in Rav's life, right? Because he was not alive yet. You know, even if you want to say he was very talented and he came out from the labor and delivery with the Zohar HaKadosh, but it's not. He was not even alive. The day that he was born, Rav passed away already. So it can't be. And therefore, the Aruch Laner, Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, he writes over here that the Girsa of Amar Leh is a mistake. It's Amar Rava. Rava said years later, next generation, Rav learned this memra of Rav Chisda codifying what his Rebbe Rav said. Rava said, wait a second, that it can't be, and he made his argument. But it's not that our Girsa that says Amar Leh, that Rava is speaking to Rav Chisda, can't really be feasible, because based on what we learned, Rav Chisda codified this in the life of Rav, and Rava could not have been alive to make a comment on that. Fine. So that basically is the timeline, and it's a geshmak thing. Actually, according to Seder HaDorot, Rav must have lived many years, more than the maximum. It's even more than the numbers of the Social Security list of today. With more, he will be living around 250 years. It will be a very long life. If you say that he is the same person as Rav Abba, the scribe, the sofer of Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli, but be as it may, Rav lived a very blessed life. The Gemara says he was mishpachat brim. He was the ultimate healthy gene family, that he had no problems, and he was very tall and handsome and extremely healthy, and he lived a very blessed long life, and of course he was the greatest scholar of his time. But now, what did Rava say actually? So we have this memra of Rav Chisda codifying Rav, that the hadas that is pasul, when it has these berries on it, is only when the berries are concentrated as a clump of berries in one place. But if it's 2 or 3 places, kasher. Says Rav Chisda, says Rava, that's impossible, because you know what the problem with that is? Amar Rava, that is like a leopard. You have dots. That's a very ugly hadas. It's not going to be kasher because it's a psul of menumar. It can't be. That's not what Rav said. This is a miscodification of what Rav Chisda said in the name of Rav. So therefore, what did Rav really say is like this. Ella, it marachima. This is how it should be said. Oshayu anavav merubim me'alav. This Mishnah that says if you have more berries than leaves on a hadas, it's pasul. Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said, Davar ze Rabbeinu Agadol amaro. This was said by Rabbeinu Agadol, right? Vehamakom yeh be'ezro shlita sheyeh l'chaim arukim v'tovim amen, right? So he's alive. He's codifying Rav, his Rebbe. And what did Rav say? Says the Gemara, Lo shanu ela anavav shchorot. That's only pasul if you look at this hadas and it looks very strange because the berries are black, right? It's the original blackberry, right? You look at it from far and it looks very strange because you have all these leaves that are nice and green, and then you have all these black dots, the black berries grown on it. That's pasul. Now, how does it work? The berries in the beginning are green. It's almost hard to even detect that they're there, and then little by little they turn like reddish color, and then they turn into black. Right? That's how as they ripen, they change color. So says the Gemara, Aval anavav yerokot. But if the berries are green, like the leaves of the hadas, then mine hadasu. This is a growth that is within the kind of hadasim, and it will be kasher. That's what Rav Chisda said in the name of Rav. So Amar Rav Papa said, Adumot kishchorot damyan. If you have red ones, it's the same halacha as black, and that would be also pasul. Now this is obviously in the simple level we understand, because it looks the way it looks, right? It's not green, it's not homogeneous with the color tone of the thing, but also is already considered the same halachic category as black. Now this is, interestingly, as the Gemara is going to say, not just a sukkah sugya, but it's a sugya in Masechet Chulin, it's a sugya in Masechet Nida. For instance, the Mishnah and the Gemara say in Masechet Nida daf chaf, there the whole daf chaf is talking about marot dam, checking marot dam, and different types of dam. And the Gemara says the 5 different marot of red. There are 5 different colors of red that are asur, right? There are different shades of red, many different shades of red. Not every shade of red is asur, what the Gemara calls red. For instance, you have to understand that perhaps what we call brown is also considered red in the language of Chumash. For instance, when Yaakov Avinu is trying to set up a system to create the different colors of stripes and so on within the flock of Lavan in the new generation, right? It says Chor Chum Bakisavim, and if you take a look at Rashi, there Rashi says it's Mar'e Adom. Chum, which we translate as brown, right, is a Mar'e Adom. Or there are many who write about Para Aduma, that even though that we call it the red heifer, is not necessarily red, the one that you pass when you're in rush to go to work. That's not like a red light. It's mamash, a reddish tinge in a brown, what we call a brown color. It's like a red-brown type of thing, right? That's what many write in explanation of what the para aduma looks like, right? It's what we call the red head. It's not really that their head there is red, but it's like, there's a tinge. There is a shade of red. So not every shade, the Gemara says, of red is a problem. What actually says that Rabbi Shimon was 60 different shades of red that they brought to him, and he was metayr all of them, right? and this and the women who were very appreciative of him being an expert. He was considered the ultimate expert in this area of understanding the marot dam. And again, the Gemara says that is not something that everyone could do. Aside from being blind, colorblind, the Gemara says many of the Amoraim, for Rava, I think the Gemara says there in Daf Chav, that he did not check marot dam because he didn't feel he has that expertise, even though that in Torah he was a tremendous expert. But nevertheless, Rabbi Shlomo was a big expert, and he was the ultimate authority of being lenient because he didn't have much of this fekot that other people had about this. Nowadays, we are machmir on all the reds because we just don't know which shade is what. And you're dealing with the Isur Karet perhaps over here, so therefore we try to stay away from that. But says the Gemara, they named their children Elazar after Elazar Rabbi Shimon, who was able to help their situation with the clarity and expertise that he had. But be that as it may, the Gemara there says there are 5 marot dam, and then the Gemara says Shachor is also, what's Shachor is now, you said 5, not 6. So why Shachor? No, Shachor is the same thing as red. Shachor is the same thing as Adom. Is Adomu Shalaka is a concentrated red that was laka. How do you say that? It was oxidated. It was damaged, right? It comes from red, so red and black. And Shachor is seen as very much interrelated in the sugyot of the Gemara. So here is one example of such, as well as Rav Papa says. Rav Papa says, aduma, when it's adumot, if the berries are red, k'shchorot dam. It's the same halacha as shchorot. Dam Rav Chanina, high dam, shachor, this blood that is shachor, and dam, by the way, does not mean blood the way we call it blood, right? Which you bleed when you have blood, but it's kind of like dam anavim mishteh chamer, right? You have any extract of the juice also could be considered dam in the language of Tanakh. So in that way, it will be kind of like a discharge, right? Again, this is where it becomes very, very questionable, especially speaking about mar'eh chum, speaking about the different shades of brown that are considered the discharge, which many, again, medically speaking, that would be dam shalaka, when we oxidated blood, much of them and mixed with mucus and so on and so forth. But again, this is a massive, deep and wide sugya of different marot dam in Shulchan Aruch, in Ismail Kupezayin, and the Gemara and Rishonim itself. But nevertheless, the Gemara there in Daf Chav says, "Hi dam shachor," this blood that is black, or the discharge that's black, adomuhu ela shelaka. It's really red. It just became loke, became changed to mar'eh shachor, but they're really the same. So says the Gemara, therefore, if you have, Rav Papa says, if you have berries that are red, also will be considered pasul. Only green is fine. Good. Says the Gemara. The next, the Braita told us that if you took these before Yom Tov, they have these berries that make it pasul, and now you just, pluck them off, and now you don't have more berries than leaves. Now your hadas is kasher. So it says the Gemara, wait a second. The mi'atin hu emad. When in the timeline of Yom Tov did you pluck these berries off? Ilema, if you say mikameh de le'agde, if you pluck them before you bundled the lulav and hadas and arava, before you tied them together, pshita, what's the question? Of course it's going to be kasher. Why shouldn't it be kasher? It's before Yom Tov. Why would it not be good? This must be, you plucked the berries after it was already in a bundle with lulav and hadasim and aravat. So says the Gemara, this should tell you the question we have been thinking and talking about the entire previous Amud. You remember the whole of this is part of the quandary of the Gemara whether or not there is dichui b'mitzvah or not dichui b'mitzvah. Remember that? We are in the midst of discussing whether or not a item of mitzvah that was pushed away, was cast away from being able to be used as a mitzvah, and now it became good, it became kasher, is that fact that it was pushed and cast away make it invalid, or maybe mitzvah, it was pushed away, fine, now it's fine, now it's halachically okay, good. We could do so. Says Gemara, from here you should see that en dichui b'mitzvah. Because why? Says the Gemara, this is amazing. Gemara is going to do 3 of this back to back. Says the Gemara, you already tied it with the lulav, and it says dichui meikarahu. The Gemara says this is considered dichui meikarahu because the moment that you tied it, right, from the very beginning that you tied it, that becomes the beginning of the mitzvah, they had asim pasul because of all these berries that they had, right? So if the asim pasul from the moment 1, from the first moment they were pasul, and now you're plucking them away, it's something that was nidche meikara. From the very beginning, it was not fit for mitzvah because it had all these berries, and now you are making it kasher. So this should be a proof that nidche meikara, that if you had an item that was cast away because he was pasul from moment 1, and now you fixed it, now it became proper for doing the mitzvah with it, it should be fine. Which would indicate that we don't say dichui b'mitzvot, right? We don't have this concept of like korbanot. Now, there are 2 things going on over here, right? Just to refresh our memories. There's dichui meikara, once the Gemara is mentioning it, we've got to refresh our memories. There's dichui meikara, that from the very beginning it was never kasher, right? And now it becomes kasher. But then there's something worse. The worst than that is, it was good, then it was literally pushed away, it became pasul, and then it became kasher again. Right? That's nir'eh, v'nitche, v'chazar v'nir'eh. It was good, it was feasible for the mitzvah, it was fit for the mitzvah, then it became pasul, it was X'd out, and now it became fixed again. That's even worse. Before in the Gemara, we left that as a teku. If you remember, we left it as, again, we threw our hands, we all know, right? Now we're going to discuss both of this. So says the Gemara, shouldn't we see from here that dichui meikara is not a dichui, and when it becomes kasher, you should be able to use it. Tifshot minad dichui meikara lo dichui. We should learn from here that dichui meikara is nothing. It's good. You could still use it. Mara says no. Leolam. Really, the case is batar de agde. It's after you bundled it, but the issue is like this: Kasavar eged hazmana be'almahu v'hazmana be'alma lav klumhu. Eged is not the beginning of the mitzvah. Tying the lulav hadas v'arava is just a hazmana for the mitzvah. It's just a hazmana for the mitzvah. It's not considered the first moment of the mitzvah. The first moment of the mitzvah is when in the morning of Yom Tov you take it and you say bracha, that's the mitzvah. The fact that you have to tie it, that's just preparation for the mitzvah, not the beginning of the mitzvah. Why is that important? Why does it make a difference? Because now, even if you plucked it beforehand, now imagine, of course, we are assuming here, right, that the issue of ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui is not an issue, right? Remember, there are 2 parallel issues that could be a problem. One is ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui, which means if I need a bundle, if I absolutely need the bundle to be tied together, then I can't fix things and make them kasher after it's bundled, because it's ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui, right? It's like fixing the schach after you put the schach up, making it kasher by cutting it off from the growth in the ground, right? So we're obviously assuming that that's not the issue here. But the second problem would have been that it was pushed away from being able to be used as a mitzvah, which is nitche. It was nitche from being able to be used for mitzvah. And on that, the Gemara says, so what that you bundled it? Even if you need the bundle, that's not the beginning of the mitzvah. And you don't have the problem of ta'aseh b'romina asui. So therefore, you ended up making it kasher before the time of mitzvah. And it's equivalent of Erev Yom Tov cutting the berries off, which is fine. That's what is fine. It's not that if it was nitche and then it became kasher, it's good. Maybe if it was nitche before and it became kasher, it's bad. But here, it was not nitche because the fact that it was bundled before Yom Tov and I cut it off from before Yom Tov. This is not on Yom Tov, right? Remember, this is Erev Yom Tov. On Erev Yom Tov, you're going and plucking these berries off. Why would it be a problem? Oh, because it's bundled and it was nitche already. No, it wasn't. Because the fact that it was bundled is not the beginning of the time of the mitzvah. You haven't started it yet even, right? Therefore, it's fine. So, in other words, the Gemara is saying, do not try to bring a raya from here that if a mitzvah, an item of mitzvah was pushed away, was cast away, xed out, that now that it becomes kasher, I could use it. Maybe I can't. Maybe once it's cast away, it stays pasul. But here would not be a raya for that. Says the Gemara. One more quick attempt on this. This was if you plucked the berries before Yom Tov, right? The Mishnah said you can't pluck them off. You can't cut them and reduce the number of the berries on Yom Tov. You can't do that. If you do it, you're over on Makev Patish, Metaken Mana, whatever the Isur will be. Says the Gemara, Ha'avar veliketan mai. But if you went on Yom Tov and you did the Isur of plucking them away, what would be the halacha? And says the Gemara, Avar veliketan is kasher. Right? Why is it kasher? How do you see that's kasher, by the way? It's embedded in the language of the Mishnah. Because think of what happens. What's the Isur? Why can't you pluck them off on Yom Tov? Why can't you pluck? Because it's metaken mana, you're fixing something. Right? So if on Yom Tov I did this, I was just over an Isur because I fixed it. Which means what? It's kasher. If it's not kasher after I pluck it on Yom Tov, I didn't fix anything. Why is it asur? You with me? So from the very fact that the halacha is that you can't pluck them on Yom Tov, you see that if you pluck them, it's kasher. Right? I said, oh, fine, it's kasher. So what happened exactly? Let's go through the chronology of what happened. The ashchur emat, when did they become black? We said green is fine, right? Black is a problem. When did they become black? Right? So blackberries matter, right? You know, that's a. So says the Gemara, when did they become black exactly? If it's before Erev Yom Tov or is it on Yom Tov? If it happened on Erev Yom Tov, right? If from yesterday, Erev Yom Tov, they became already black, it is considered dichui meikara because before the time of Yom Tov arrived, they already were nitche. They were pushed away from being able to be used for halachic mitzvah. And tifshot mina, and if that's the case, you should be able to learn from our Mishnah, dichui meikara, that dichui meikara is not a problem. Because here you have something that an Erev Yom Tov was cast away from mitzvah, and now on Yom Tov you made it kasher and it's good. Right? So that would tell you that Dichui Meikara, when it was Meikara from beginning of the time of the mitzvah, when Yom Tov hit, it was pasul, and now it became kasher. So you see, Dichui is not a thing. Dichui and Dichui b'mitzvot, you should learn from here. The Gemara says, so that can't be the case, because we are scratching our head forever if Dichui b'mitzvah is Dichui or not. So that can't be the case. The case is, the Ashchur b'Yom Tov. They literally turned colors on Yom Tov itself. Last night in Erev Yom Tov, when we did the candle lighting, they were still okay color. They're still greenish, and now they're reddish or blackish. So on Yom Tov, they changed color. The Gemara says, well, that's even worse, because that is nir'eh, v'nitche, v'nir'eh, v'chazar v'nir'eh. That means that they were okay when the time of mitzvah came. That's nir'eh, was good. V'nitche, then they became black and they became pasul. And now you pluck them off and they became chazar v'nireh. That is the teiku we had on Amud Aleph. You remember that? We left it as a question. We left it as, we don't know, let us see what happens. We don't know, right? So nireh v'nitche v'chazar v'nireh is a question in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Shamat mina, you should learn from this. Nireh v'nitche v'chazar v'nireh is going to be good. Says the Gemara, no. Lo leolam de ashkur meikara. Really, it became shachor, it became black from Erev Yom Tov, from before Yom Tov. And says the Gemara, dichui meikara, de lo ave dichui tifshud mina. We should learn from it that dichui meikara, when something was already from the very beginning, pasul, and then it became kasher, that it's fine. That we should learn, that en dichui b'mitzvot, aval nireh v'nitche v'chozer v'nireh lo tifshud. But the other case of it was good, and then it became pasul, and then it became good again, that we cannot learn from this halacha. But what we have so far is l'chora that en dichui b'mitzvot. That's what we got so far, right? That if something from beginning meikara was pasul, was nitche, and now on Yom Tov it became kasher, that it's valid for using it as a mitzvah. If the berries were there as black color, which is invalidates, it completely makes it pasul from before Yom Tov, and on Yom Tov someone plucked them away or they fell, it becomes kasher for the mitzvah. We don't say dichui b'mitzvah. There's going to be one last attempt of this that we will Be'ezrat Hashem complete in the next shiur. Chazak u'baruch.